Michael. And so I imagine as you watch this documentary, it is to some degree some confirmation of stuff you already kind of knew, right?
It is. It hasn't been revelatory for me. First of all, nice to be on with you, Colin. It hasn't been revelatory for me or for, I think, any of the people that you see quoted in there or who had been around. But what it is for everyone else to get a chance to see it. And the one thing I do appreciate is hearing Michael discuss it with the benefit of perspective. And, hearing him look back and just seeing how unwilling he is to let certain things go, in particular the grudge with Isaiah Thomas. But you see what resonates with him. You see what sticks with him. But I think it's a chance for other people to see. It's funny. Some of these stories that he's telling, in particular the time he went to go to retrieve Dennis Rodman when Rodman was AWOL, I had heard those stories before. I think it's fun that now it's out, it's being discussed publicly. We can all share in these stories.
I defend him on the gambling issue. I said, listen, me gambling $100 is Michael gambling $50,000 on a golf game. He is a relentless competitive guy. And, it shows him with security guards, flipping quarters up against the wall. He didn't hide from it. That's who he is. He let himself be mic'd when he golfed, mic'd when he was flipping coins up against the wall. The gambling issues, again, that was pretty much understood. Do you think he addressed those appropriately?
I think so. It's weird. He doesn't come off as super convincing. I believe him, but just his tone when he's defending himself against certain things is weird. And maybe it's in part because he's not in practice of having to defend himself. He wasn't in that position a lot throughout his career. All the exalted Michael Jordan. He didn't have to be defensive, and so he comes off as a little defensive here. One of the rare times that he's being asked to do so. But you got at it. The desire that he has anyone been as driven by money as Michael Jordan? The drive that he had to become the most marketed athlete in the world, certainly the most marketed athlete in team sports, in American team sports, unprecedented levels of endorsement dollars for an African-American team sport player, had the chance to get the highest salary in NBA history twice. Comes back for the Bulls in the late 90s and has a $30 million contract and a $36 million contract. And that was important. And it had been important to him for a while. Magic Johnson, while covering the 93 finals for NBC, would sit around and chat with the media. And he told us one thing Michael hasn't had is that distinction of being the highest paid player in the game. And that was something that he'd wanted for a long time, wasn't able to finally get it until 96. And so you saw Michael's desire just to have money at all costs. And it wasn't about the need for the money when it came to, tossing quarters against his security guys for $20, but it was just desire to get your money, to beat you by taking your money.
I had Charles Barkley on yesterday, J.A. Adande joining us, and I said, listen, as an African-American, you can have an opinion on this, and mine doesn't really count as much. I see it from the outside. I said, I do think we ask so much of our athletes, and so many have to overcome situations in their life, that by the time they get to their professional status, I just appreciate them. I'm not going to hold them accountable for great political savvy or great business acumen. I just appreciate, I can separate, first of all, art from artist. We're all flawed. But I think it's unfair, looking back, that we asked Michael to be an activist or care about something politics, which he had almost no interest in. But that's my perspective. What is your perspective on that?
I've always wished and wanted and hoped that he would do more, but I don't think it's a major detraction. One thing I was thinking, okay, what if he had endorsed Harvey Gantt? Would that have made a difference? Would that have changed enough minds to get him elected? He did support him and make donations to his campaign.
Yes, he did.
So do you think that matters more than his endorsement? LeBron James endorsed Hillary Clinton in 2016, and Donald Trump still won in the state of Ohio. So part of it is what difference would it have made?
Right.
Also, I don't look for our athletes, our entertainers, to provide leadership in that. That's not their area of expertise.
Thank you.
And especially today when we have an African-American former president. I'm interested in his political opinions, and Barack Obama's endorsements. Those carry much more weight to me than what an athlete or entertainer does. And also, what if he'd been outspoken, but we disagreed with him?
That's right.
Like there's no guarantee that people are going to say what you want them to say. So I think what it was that we wanted them to say things. It's funny. Like I look at Mark Hamill's tweets on social media, and he's very politically outspoken. And I think yeah, this is cool. Luke Skywalker agrees with me. But what difference does it make ultimately? It maybe makes me feel better. I think it makes people feel better if the people that they look up to hold the same views as them, right? And I think that's what we want.
Yeah.
But all it does is make us feel better. I'm not sure it makes that much of a difference. And I do think you can make a difference behind the scenes. And Michael did do some things behind the scenes. And yes, he could have done more in front of the cameras and spoken out. Maybe he could have spoken out more for people who didn't have the advantages and the luxuries that he did. I'm not sure he did that enough. But I know he did do things to support people who didn't have as much. And just go to the media guide for the Charlotte Hornets and look at the directory and look at the diversity of the staff that I would say is higher than the typical professional sports front office. And I think you can say he's made a difference in that way.
Yeah, I've told sports writers or sports media people in my life, Chuck Todd can barely change my mind politically. A sportscaster can't. So you're doing this for an attaboy. You're doing this for validation or preening or projecting on social media. You're not going to change anybody's vote, so don't screw your career up. J.A. Adande is joining us. So I want to shift to Kobe now. Did you ever talk to Michael about young Kobe, and what did he say, J.A.?
I did. I happened to be in D.C. when Kobe was on one of those stretches scoring 40 points every game. And I asked Michael about it. This is when Michael was playing for the Wizards. And he said, I've seen him that same desire to separate himself from his peers that I had. The way that I wanted to separate from Clyde Drexler or Charles Barkley, and he wanted to separate from, I forget who he was being compared to at the time, maybe Allen Iverson, Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter. And he saw that. And, we've come to learn both from Michael at Kobe's memorial and Kobe in this documentary. They were able to interview him before he passed away, talking about the relationship that they had. And they did have this bond. And part of it was just that ultra competitive fury, that drive that they had. I used to see Kobe, one time he was injured the 03-04 season, and he had nothing better to do. So before the game, he would challenge and bet, members of the media like Michael Thompson, the former Laker who's on the radio broadcast crew, other reporters around. He tried to engage me. I knew better than to bet against Kobe Bryant. I was not going to bet against Kobe Bryant. So he'd do stuff like, could he make a half-court shot left-handed? His right shoulder was injured, so he was shooting everything left-handed. And could he make one from half-court if you gave him 3 tries? And, if he did, you had to do like 50 push-ups or 100 push-ups. They were kind of low stakes. He wasn't going to try to bankrupt you.
Yeah.
He would bet the ball boys in Miami. He'd give them a pair of shoes if they beat him in a shooting contest. If he won, they had to run the steps in the arena. And of course he won. And I just remember this grin on his face as the kids running up and down the steps. And Kobe says, "Isn't competition great? It makes everything better."
Yeah, a lot of similarities.
Those guys had to turn everything into competition.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, sometimes our greatest strengths are our personal frailties, and that's the reality of Michael. Is he was hyper aggressive and sometimes to the point where it could be mean spirited or overwhelming. You work in a college campus now as the director of sports journalism at Northwestern. When Kobe passed away, your students grew up watching Kobe, but they probably didn't grow up watching MJ. But do you sense The Last Dance, do you sense his influence on your college campus, even for 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds?
Well, it's certainly been there with the Air Jordans. I mean, you walk on campus, kids still born long after Michael's heyday are walking around wearing Air Jordans and really value them. What they're seeing, so Melissa Isaacson, my colleague who covered Michael for the Chicago Tribune in the 90s, she's on our faculty, and her and I do a chat with our graduate sports journalism students, every Sunday during the airings of The Last Dance. And just to answer any questions they might have, just tell some behind-the-scenes stories of covering Michael and the Bulls. And I think it's fun for them. And they really are just amazed, I think, at how driven he was, how great he was, how big those Bulls teams were. Just everything they did mattered, how larger than life they seemed, how outrageous Dennis Rodman was, all of it. I think it's difficult to relate. And I said, I kind of compare it to when people watched the U 30 for 30 on the University of Miami football team and just how wild and outrageous they were. And you just can't fathom a football team acting that way. You just can't fathom the circumstances of this team, in part because they didn't have social media. Like, I think Michael Jordan and the Bulls would have been destroyed